So here's the deal. Creality stopped talking to me a while ago. I've got my theories about why, but I'll cover that at the end of the video. But they didn't send me this printer, nor will they respond to any of my messages. And how should I see fit to react? Well, I'll do what I always do. I'll give their printer a completely fair and unbiased review. Because one of us can be mature and professional, whilst the other is a smelly bum fart face and isn't getting invited to my birthday party. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. So the Halot Mage S is for all intents and purposes the Halot Mage Pro again, but now with a 14K screen. And whilst this printer hasn't evolved significantly since the last one, the community and competition around it has. But it means we also know a lot more about the value of its features now, such as the inclusion of ACF, which the last one had, but I'd never heard of before, or even realised it had until testing the Elegoo's ACF printers after that initial review of the Mage. And if you haven't seen my Mage Pro review, it's worth a watch because in several ways, the printer is hilariously bad. But now, with fresh eyes and a determination to be even more fair with this review, it's worth breaking it down to its core components so you can see if this is the right choice for you, because in fairness, it might be. So as I said, it's a 14K printer, but like all other 14K printers, it's not really 14K. With 13,320 pixels on the x-axis and only 5,120 on the y-axis, this is no better than any 12K printer. I've got a separate video called 12K printers are irrelevant, which explains this better. But in this case, it doesn't mean the print quality is the same as all other 12 and 14K printers, because there are other important variables in this particular product. Externally, I love the look of the machine. A dark grey metal base and a big orange lid, they're both evocative of my own branding, so I'm easily swayed towards its style. And it's got nice big rubber legs. I also love that it's got an up and over lid. Now, depending on your use case, be it at home or on racking in a print farm, you may be for or against this, but if you're against it, you can easily remove it. But like always with these lids, it's worth noting that whilst there are physical product dimensions on the website, you will actually need 40 centimeters in depth and 79 centimeters in height around the printer to fully open this lid. There's one main socket on the back because this has an internal transformer, and next to that is an RJ45 socket for a wired network connection. I quite like these, it's more useful in a farm or a fleet. And you also have a port here for the included air extraction hose, which to be fair is a great addition to any machine, one that so far only Creality have bothered to include. Yes, you need a nearby window, but this is a better way to handle fumes than a crappy internal carbon filter or a Mars mate. The front has two USB ports. I love USB ports on the front, and here you get two. You can use either to connect your USB drive, and the other is for an additional accessory that I'll come on to shortly because I bought one. The build volume is 223 by 126 by 230mm, which is pretty standard for a modern 10-inch printer. Now, whilst the build plate has a laser etched surface, it's not quite as deeply etched as its direct competitors, which I personally prefer. But when you have your settings dialed in well, you typically shouldn't have much of an issue with adherence. But please remember, I said typically. Now, this bed attaches to the Z-rail with a rather unique mechanism. Now, the community has quite vocally favoured latches of late, and the more traditional style is a large bolt. This has some weird, small, twisty screw latch thing. It works, but its shape makes it neither comfortable or easy, and it requires several turns to tighten and loosen the bed. And speaking of this whole Z-rail mechanism, there's no special smart features here that we've seen in other modern printers like auto bed leveling. That's not really auto bed leveling anyway. But this still means no resin level detection or early failure detection either. And I can even see the argument that this is a double-edged sword because those more advanced functions are still new and some people have trust issues with them. Here, the argument for it should be that we have the benefits of a 12/14K printer resolution, but with the more tried and tested hardware of old. But again, I said, should. But this means leveling on this printer is also more traditional. Now, it comes leveled from the factory, but if you need to adjust it, it's a case of loosen the bolt, send the build plate to its lowest position, and tighten the bolts. But this is where things get a little bit weird, and when I say weird, just imagine I'm saying Creality. The Z-axis movement feature of this printer is odd. Creality. It's how Creality do it. There's no incremental move up or move down by a certain distance function like every other resin printer ever. There are just two functions, reset position and leveling. The first moves the plate to the top as fast as it can, and the second moves it slowly downward to the bottom where the plate touches the release film once leveled. And if you want it to stop somewhere different, that's quite common, you need to press stop whilst it's moving in one of the two directions it moves in. When leveling it, for example, and you need to loosen the bolts, you move the plate all the way to the top, but the lid actually gets in the way of the bolts a little bit. And when tightening these bolts, unfortunately the metal is so soft that it's difficult to determine how hard tight is and how hard too tight is, because you can easily go beyond it. And that led me to cause one bolt to keep turning eternally as it had been over tightened. For reasons I'll come on to later, I've had to actually re-level this about 10 times, and I already know people will complain about me being too heavy-handed, but come on guys, how many of these have I done now? Like, I know what I'm doing, and I wouldn't even be pointing this out if I didn't think it was a potential problem worth a mention to you so you can be aware of it. If I actually thought this was a me problem, it'd be a lot easier and less embarrassing for me to just not tell you and pretend this never happened. Now moving on to the vat, the max fill line is at 1 litre, which is great and should honestly be the minimum for any printer of this size, but the depth of the vat or the space above that line is so low that once the build plate enters, the resin actually rises bumhole twitchingly close to the brim. Now, the vat comes pre-installed with what I'm going to call ACF film. Creality are calling it Pictor release film, but it does everything ACF does, and Creality haven't explained how it is different in any way. This feels like they're just trying to avoid using the word ACF because people generally don't like ACF. It has its use, but that's a whole different topic. But they do include a sheet of FEP in the box. Now, I don't know if this is the newer NFEP, also known as PFA, but it just says FEP on the package. I think it is FEP, but I'll explain why when we talk about print quality. Now, I talked about how close the resin was to the brim when the actual plate is inside it, but the bigger issue I've seen is that due to the speed of the bed when raising up and down, coupled with the low viscosity of the ultra-thin fast resins, this plate causes splashes all over the place. The worst time for this is when a print completes and the build plate rockets to the top as fast as it can every time, and when printing smaller models like flat exposure tests or the cones of calibration, the plate is still submerged in the resin when it's complete, and the rapid rise out of the vat sends liquid resin all over the inside of the lid and other internal components, including the lead screw. Now, speaking of internal components, Creality have done away with the resin pump. I had issues with mine in the Mage Pro, as did the print house, because the build plate actually snagged on it and snapped the spout. And I've already said many times in many videos, I see little value in these devices personally. That's me. Especially on printers of this size. Bigger ones, yeah, but at this size I can easily just pour the resin out. Well, I could if the corner spouts were actually useful. They aren't, but this isn't a dig at Creality. I've had this problem with most brands. But even with crappy spouts or lack thereof, it's still a lot easier to just pour resin out and wipe off the excess than need to clean out a pump. The other internal module is the carbon filter, which pumps air out to the extractor hose. Unlike internal filters, which repeatedly cycle air in the chamber, the air in this one gets one pass over the carbon filter, and just like the Mars Mate, the rest is just pumped into your room unless you turn it off in the settings. But it would probably be best to definitely use that extraction hose and get it pumping the fumes outside. Though for those of us in colder environments, this will also pump out any warm air that you need to keep the resin warm. But at least this time the module is solidly affixed to the rear chassis because the one in the Mage Pro just kept falling off. So the other feature I bought is the optional accessory, and that's the Nebula camera. This just plugs into one of the front USB ports and sits inside the machine. And there's no official or tidy way to install it, there's not even a double-sided tape strip for you to affix it solidly. But mine did fit lazily in the back left corner where the resin pump used to be. The cable hung out the side, under the lid, and then it tucked under the machine before it was plugged into the USB port on the front. Now, in what I'm going to keep referring to as typical Creality style, this is not the most elegant solution, but it works. And whilst it is just a 720p camera, it's still one of the best I've seen implemented into a printer in terms of video quality. Though you do need to dial in the focus yourself using the ring on the front, but this gives some nice depth of field for a camera of this size. But my favourite part is that in the absence of a built-in light, this camera switches automatically to night vision mode when your room lights go out. So unlike most of the other time-lapse and monitoring cameras I've seen in resin printers, this one is useful. But it still has room for improvement because inconsistent image capture timing makes the footage seem, well, it's shaky, it's not smooth. And it doesn't capture a video showing the bed lifting after the final layer is cured, just to kind of finish the scene off. But regardless, I think it's a decent add-on feature which will help Creality promote this machine for free thanks to users of it sharing time-lapses as shorts on social platforms. But in again, Creality world, the method of obtaining your time-lapses, however, is once again jankily implemented. You see, your time-lapses are saved on the printer, but to get them off the printer, you must have signed the printer into the Creality cloud and have the phone app signed in as well. And you then find your time-lapses rather unintuitively by going to the device screen for all your devices, hitting the 3 dots in the corner for that device, going to device settings, then time-lapses, then clicking upload, giving it a name, then uploading it. But you still can't watch it. You see, to actually view the footage, you then need to log into the Creality Cloud website on a PC, or maybe this works on your phone, I've never tested it. You go to your account page, then to prints, then find the small tab for time lapses, then download it so that you can finally view the footage. It took me nearly 2 hours to figure this out. And I've talked enough in the past about how crappy this Creality app is, but I am happy to report I no longer get the unskippable FOMO ad every time I open it. But the app is still a crap show mess that looks more like AliExpress or Temu than a credible companion app for a technical device. And since we're speaking of Creality's complete ignorance of what makes a good user experience, the UI. Now this is slightly improved over the Mage Pro. Slightly. It's better translated and some colour's been used in the settings for better visual separation. But I'm still going to call this whole thing odd. In so many ways, it goes against the grain of every other brand, and I just don't feel like it does this in any way that I would describe as good or helpful. It just does things weird, like accessing the function just to move the plate up and down. It's a common activity, as any experienced resin printer user will tell you. This is nested 3 layers deep. You have to go into settings, then print settings, then Z-axis move. Whereas things like Wi-Fi settings, firmware update, and printer details, settings that you would hopefully only ever use once in a printer's lifetime, if ever, are just 2 layers deep. Why on earth are the functions that you would use less frequently more prominent than the ones that you use more frequently? This is just bad design. And when you go to print something, this is odd too. You insert the USB drive and the sliced files on the drive appear, and when you tap one, it copies that file to local storage, and that's not the bad thing. Because instead of then giving you the option to immediately print it, this actually replaces like the prepared file, which is the one in the top left corner of the print list screen at all times. You actually then need to press that one and go through more settings to start the print. Why can't we just, in fact, how is it not obvious to Creality that it would be better to just select the file, choose the settings, then walk away as the printer copies and starts the print completely on its own? Why are we stood waiting for this printer to copy a file to then go back to it? Because sometimes it takes 5-10 minutes to copy the file over. I guess at least now on the Mage S, that top left model has a different colour icon, making it stand out. But the most annoying part is that when your USB drive contains multiple models with file names longer than about 17 characters, the text scrolls. So I was constantly looking between multiple files, missing the beginning, waiting for the scroll to finish and start again, just so I can see what that is, and then doing that to the next scrolling file name so I can determine which one's which. Just leave the file name static, guys. We don't need to see the whole thing in the file extension. I can tell what it is from the first 17 characters. Who thought scrolling text was a good idea? Seriously. Now look, I know I'm complaining about this UI with the privilege of someone who's now reviewed over 60 printers, and the truth is, if you buy this printer, you'll get used to it and figure out how things work in no time. But what I'm saying is that pretty much all other brands have already done this better, so much better. But this is what Creality do. There's no sensible hierarchy of options. There's no care for the user at all. It's all just throw together software whilst pretending through bullshit marketing that all is great. And what frustrates me the most is that this is all easy stuff to fix. I'm not wanting to put Creality down, make them fail, or have them burn to the ground. I want them to succeed. I want them to compete in this space so we all have more options and brands pushing each other forward. But Creality's current approach, in fact, for as long as I've known them, their approach to software is so far behind that I can't tell if this continued approach of poor delivery is through ignorance or arrogance. And there are positives in this machine too. I do see it useful that when you go to print a file, you can choose the settings from the slicer where you sliced it, or choose the print parameters, the native settings, which you've actually set as default on the printer itself. That kind of thing could be useful in print farms that have a series of different printers with different materials in, and you just take any sliced file, and no matter how it was sliced other than layer height, each machine can be independently set up to have its own correct settings for the designated material you've put in it. Now onto the print quality, and this is the part where things don't go as well as they've gone so far for this machine, and I've been somewhat critical already. But before we begin, here is the manual's instruction page on Dynax mode. Please pause the video and study this because there's going to be a test on it shortly. And I've written this part of the video 3 times as I'm trying to get the printer to do certain things, and if you want the full story, I've got a members only talking head video explaining it in more detail. Right, the Creality Fast Resin. I used this with the ACF film and I printed fast, but the resin is crap. And I say ACF when Creality call it pick to release film, but as I said, it does the same thing. I can't see a difference. It's frosty, it releases easier than other films, it causes lines in vertical surfaces, and it's weak, because mine actually punctured after about 6 prints. But this resin is so brittle that when I was removing parts from the plate, they shattered and flew everywhere. One piece actually ended up in my Mars 5 Ultras vat over 3 meters away and punctured that release film too. And unfortunately my experience with the printer got worse because when printing in fast mode after a few times, I noticed that some models had huge layer slips. I thought that I'd left the plate loose, but it turns out the actual Z-rail screws holding the arm had become loose. So I tightened them, but 2 prints later, this happened again. So I had to add some Loctite to all of these before re-securing all 4. And both times I did this required leveling the bed. So this is when and how I threaded one of the plate screws that I was talking about earlier. But if you want fast printing and have a decent fast resin, this printer will do it. It's very fast. Right then, test time. Remember Dynax mode, the bit I told you to pause? Well, please pause the video now and add in the comments what Dynax mode does, starting with I believe Dynax mode is, so I know who is answering my question and who already knew. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Okay, have you done that? So here's the correct answer. Did any of you put anything along the lines of it being a digital clutch? You see, I turned Dynax mode on during the setup because why not? It wasn't explained to me, and of course I want fast printing, I have fast resin. But when I swapped the ACF film over to the included FEP sheet, I tried to slow the printer down because the high detail frozen hyperfine resin needs a much slower lift speed. And despite me setting this to 1mm a second in Halot box, the slowest speed available as per the settings on the screen of the printer was 5mm a second. 5 times faster than what this resin can handle. And I was about to do another review saying once again, you cannot use high quality resins or high detail resins with this printer, like I said with the Mage Pro. But on a hunch, I turned off Dynax mode, and you can actually then see that the speed range drops in the printer's onboard settings. Now bear in mind, when I got the Halot Mage S, I sent 26 or so questions to Creality. They answered about 3 of them, and then when I asked for detail on the others, including the question of what is Dynax mode, they came back to me and said, we're not answering any more of your questions. This was in March 2023, nearly 15 months ago. But what this does is that in normal mode, the movement speed is between 1mm a second and 10mm a second. But in Dynax mode, it's between 5mm a second and 100mm a second. You can actually see this by turning the mode on and off and then going to the printer settings, and it shows you the ranges available within each mode. Now honestly, I've got no idea why the printer needs to be this fast when the settings provided by Creality themselves for their own fast resin tops out at 30mm a second in Dynax Plus mode. And FYI, I've still got no idea what Dynax Plus mode is in relation to Dynax mode, and again, Creality aren't talking to me, and I hope you can agree from the manual page I showed you, this is not explained at all. But I still haven't got to the biggest problem with this printer yet, and that is, unlike every other printer ever, or at least in the last 2 or 3 years, that has 2 stages for lift and retract speeds, this just has 1 speed. You see, normally you would slowly lift at about 1mm a second for this resin for the release film to start to peel, and you do that for about the first 3mm on a machine of this size. Then at another 5mm at a much faster speed, basically as fast as whatever the printer is can go, and that's a total lift height of 8mm. But here, there's only 1 stage, only 1 speed, so when you have a resin like this that needs a 1mm a second lift speed to start the peel, you're actually stuck with that 1mm a second for all 8mm up and all 8mm down. This makes printing painfully slow. Now, after a couple of attempts, I was able to get an exposure test printed which shows the quality using FEP is just as good as any other Sharp 12 or 14K printer, but when I tried to print actual models, that was a whole different story. I actually wanted to print these cool vampire models by Loot Studios to show that their bundles come with 32mm miniatures, 75mm statues, and busts. They come with loads of different characters in these scales in each bundle. And I'm loving Loot Studios right now, and they've given me an opportunity to promote them. Links are in the description, please check them out. If you sign up, I make a commission at no cost to you. But they're definitely worth checking out. I've been promoting them for much longer than they've been giving me any commissions for it. But anyway, even after the 45 minutes it took to slice these models in Halot Box, and that's where other slicers would do it in less than 10, and printing with painfully slow 1mm a second speeds, which had an estimated completion of over 34 hours, where most equivalent modern machines would do this in less than 20, the prints just failed. Even after several attempts, they just wouldn't stay attached to the build plate, and I'm sorry, I've given up. And I haven't done that lightly, but this just does not work, and I don't have endless days to try and fix it. I honestly haven't had adherence issues like this with a printer since we started using PFA film like 2 or 3 years ago, and that is what leads me to believe that what they shipped with this is normal old FEP. So I really do want to be fair to this printer. I actually want to be more fair than most, because I don't want to show that I'm just doing this video to react to the fact that they're not talking to me anymore. I am desperate to find some kind of redemption for this thing, but I've got to be honest guys, I am struggling. And if you still think I'm just doing this to be a vindictive dick, try and consider this. I don't get paid to make these videos. I earn a little bit of money off YouTube views, but honestly, it's pittance. It's not enough to cover 1/10 of the cost of the printer. And this video has cost me money. I've had to buy the printer and the camera. It's also cost me twice as much to make as other videos from an editing point of view, because it takes twice as long to make a negative review, because I have to justify every single negative point that I have about it so that I don't get hate in the comments of, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. Trust me guys, I've done it. But I am happy to take feedback if you think I've missed something. So the only actual value I'm going to get from this, because I can't imagine anyone's going to buy this printer after watching this review and clicking my affiliate link, the only value I get from it is your trust that I'm being straight with you, no matter what the product is, how I got the product, or how I feel about the company that makes it. So if you want a printer for speed, okay, fine. If you have this machine and enjoy it, great. But there is a sea of better quality, more functional and easier to use machines available at a lower price. And there's just no value in this having a 14K screen when it uses ACF film. And the 14K screen is the only real change between this and the Pro from last year. So you'd get the same print quality from the old 8K screen when using ACF. But those old screens are becoming obsolete now, so this release is more of a necessary change for Creality's benefit, dressed up to look like something new. So if you want it for speed and you're happy with it and its quirks, have at it. But if you want it for print quality and sharpness, it just wasn't designed with that in mind properly, and the included FEP sheet is a misleading addition. I would completely avoid this if quality is your goal, because it's not worth the hassle, and again, there are both better and cheaper options available. Now, I said I'd tell you the story, and Creality actually stopped talking to me a few months ago, and my contact even told me he no longer worked at Creality, only for me to find a few weeks later he was still speaking with other content creators. This is part of why my thumbnail says Creality are liars. The other part is the pessimistic side of me that has assumed that they do not want me to cover their products because I'll tell you what I just told you about it. The truth. And in turn, I've inferred that they want to hide the truth about this product from you. And yes, I am slightly bitter that they've stopped working with me, but I'm more just disappointed that Creality seem to be a company who can't take valid feedback and iterate better products. Because I want them to succeed. My first ever printer I ever touched was a CR10, so they're always going to have that soft spot in my heart because they're the ones who started me on this journey. It just frustrates me because they've become as big as they are, and they have the potential to be one of the greatest brands on the market, and they are just so ignorant or arrogant to the blatant fact that what they need to be focusing on is user experience more than ever. All the other brands have cracked it, and as soon as a brand does come along and deliver the bamboo style user experience in resin printing, no matter how good that printer's hardware is, they will completely own the resin printer market. Creality has the potential to do this. They could be winning and laughing at all of the other companies out there, but they just don't get it. Tell me I'm wrong. In fact, don't. Go and tell them they're wrong. Once in a Six Side said it to their face in his review, and he was absolutely rock solid 100% right, but they still just don't get it. They don't understand what the user needs, and it seems like they don't care. So whilst I've done negative reviews before, like the Frozen Mighty Revo, which genuinely pained me, yet I still respect that company, I now have zero respect for Creality and will continue to do so until they start actually caring about their customers. And Creality, if you're watching this, I am still open to talk with you. I didn't shut down communication, you did. You have my number, and you need to realize I'm not trying to rob you, I'm trying to help you. I want to say thanks to you all for watching this one through to the end, and if you got this far, then you are invited to my birthday party, and our members who are on the screen right now get to sit in the VIP section. They also get their names on the screen as seen here. They get exclusive videos like the whole relationship drama between me and Creality leading up to this one. They get influence on the channel's direction and special roles on our Discord server, so please join our Discord server. And please sign up as a member here and join them and get all of those lovely benefits. Please check out Loot Studios models using the link in the description, and if you do buy this printer, please click my affiliate link. Until next time, you shall not pass. Fohammer out.